Two guys standing in an orange wasteland, swapping anecdotes and cracking wise about their genitalia. A short series that elevated the logo of a website, one that was already immediately recognizable, and catapulting it into something instantly iconic. In only a few short episodes, we instantly fell in love with these two, introducing many to a new generation of animation. Now seemingly outliving the very logo they were based on, here we are 15 years later with a series touching its old peak popularity without any new content yet released, all thanks to a few teases and one man's unmistakable sound of contempt. This is JohnnyUtah's TANKMEN. My name is Graham and welcome to Flashlight, the series where I talk about all things Flash related. People are the most excited for TANKMEN they've been in 15 years. I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about the history of the series, which itself is rooted in some of the earliest days of Newgrounds history, taking a look back at those old episodes and maybe looking at what's still left to come. I conducted mini interviews with Newgrounds creator Tom Fulp and artist Andrew Brosina, as well as a full interview with TANKMEN Series creator JohnnyUtah to fill in some of the blanks of the history of this series. Those full transcripts will be available over on the Two Left Thumbs Patreon. With the Newgrounds tank logo coming before the TANKMEN themselves, I want to briefly share some of those origins. But first, real quick, this video is brought to you by the Scrabdackle Kickstarter campaign. It's in its final week right now, and has already crushed several stretch goals. This action exploration game about a wizard's first adventure is something you're not going to want to miss, and I'll talk about it in more detail a little later. Tom Fulp started a Neo Geo fanzine at the age of 13 back in 1991. This was titled Newground. You know, Neo, New, Geo, Ground. Tom has written on the Newgrounds history page, "I published Newground from my parents' basement in Perkasie, Pennsylvania, sending sporadic issues to around 100 members of a club on Prodigy. I was 13 at the time, which explains why I have so much faith in today's 13-year-olds. And here we are now, having characters like Pico, TANKMEN, and Newgrounds at large being thrown back into the public sphere thanks to the creativity and efforts of a new generation of creators." The eventual website that followed went through a few iterations better saved for a full Newgrounds history video. But after operating for about a year with a generic red NG logo designed by Tom himself using a free font, he hired his friend Andrew Brosina to create some art for the site. Andrew created user-level icons as well as the now iconic tank logo. Well, not quite this yet, but we had the prototype. Black and white, a man with goggles, and a big honkin' tank. Something bold and recognizable in its own right. I was curious where that style came from, and whether or not the idea was always to do a tank. I wanted something in the style of the Brute album cover by KMFDM. We had tried things like a robot and air vehicles before I suggested a tank. Only now through this interview, and recently replaying Pico School for the Let's Play channel, do I know why Cassandra inserts this bit of German into that opening dialogue. KMFDM. I never knew that was a band. The black and white was inspired by Brute's pop art style, which itself was influenced by military propaganda posters, and I think the yellow and orange sunbeams were my idea? I hope I'm right. Newgrounds got some strong mileage out of this first edition, in use from 2000 to 2006. The logo update came right around the time I made my first Newgrounds account, so I wouldn't have seen a lot of the old logo, and I didn't appreciate at the time that this revision was such a significant thing. Jeff Bendelin, aka JohnnyUtah, was a relatively new user on the site, having only joined in 2004. His first ever submission was an entry in a contest to animate a segment from the Opie and Anthony show. There is limited animation on display, but it highlighted Jeff's distinct way of doing caricatures, which was strong back then, but has only been refined over the years. It also had that distinct adult-oriented immaturity added in. Something that would have been right at home on Newgrounds. Speaking with JohnnyUtah now, I was laid off from another Flash animation job where I was doing character designs and caricatures on an animated TV show for VH1. So in the downtime I entered that contest and won, but also inquired if they knew any other local Flash animation businesses that were possibly hiring. After meeting with Tom a few times, JohnnyUtah was offered a job, and in 2006 he joined the Newgrounds staff as an artist and animator. In fact, he still works there now. You can see his artwork all over the current iteration of the site, as well as being the lead artist and animator on the upcoming Newgrounds produced game, Nightmare Cops. Alongside updating user-level icons, one of his first assignments was the Newgrounds tank logo redesign. No one else had attempted a formal logo redesign until then. The entire site was due for a redesign at large, and it was JohnnyUtah's idea to attempt a logo update at the same time. I offered to try polishing the logo. To be fair, the original has a rough, charming look to it, but it seemed like Tom was also ready for a change, so I gave it a shot. The goal was to upgrade the existing logo without being too divergent from it. Two of the sticking points were to make the turret more bold and better clarify the wheels in the treads. Plus, with this update, they would have the opportunity to properly animate the logo. And if and when they ever did seasonal iterations on things, it would be easy enough for JohnnyUtah to step in and play around with that while still keeping it with his style. The tank was always black and white on orange, but I did try other tank designs, and it got a bit out there, but I reined it back into what you see now, kind of keeping the same spirit of the original, but cleaner. Throughout the TANKMEN series, we've seen little glimpses at what a more detailed version of the tank from Jeff would look like. Unfortunately, there's no samples of those other redesign attempts. Up until then, the logo was thought of as only that, a logo, rather than any sort of actual character. I'm not sure if he ever had been called TANKMEN before JohnnyUtah's series, or if he was just the driver? The same year as the logo redesign, we had TANKMEN 1 on June 30th, 2006, and TANKMEN 1.5 about 6 weeks later, with the sequel acting as Johnny's own Midnight Sun, telling the same events from the perspectives of a rival group of tankmen. And yes, Midnight Sun is obviously the most culturally appropriate companion piece to draw comparisons between, based on the timing, themes, romances, and rampant cock jokes. That's what both series are known for, right? Creating an animated series was Jeff's idea. He had carte blanche with the series. Each episode is what he came up with. I would say these movies were made in Newgrounds' infancy, which is reflected in the immature humor. But let's get real, Newgrounds has never grown up, and that's why we all love it. A random pairing of characters talking about nothing and sprinkling in dick jokes always has and always will be the peak of what the internet has to offer, especially Flash animations. Back when Newgrounds was new, we had games about clubbing seals, and now literally this week I saw a new animation of John Arbuckle keeping humanoid stand-ins for Garfield and Odie held captive in his house. The beauty of this site has always been its unpredictability, bold sense of style and humor, and an avant-garde approach that could never exist elsewhere. You can call it infantile, I call it high art.
I hate you so much it's unreal, and you made me lose my heart on. You're gonna pay for that.
I kid. I do hope to one day make a video highlighting the punk rock attitude Newgrounds has always maintained towards creator freedom. There's a reason its user base is as die-hard and loyal as they have been all these years. I promised I'd circle back to Scrabdackle. This is a game being developed entirely by one solo developer. We've already spent the rest of the video talking about a hilarious creative world spawning from one creator's specific sense of humor and vision. There's currently a free demo with well over an hour of content. You can battle several bosses. There are secrets all over the place to discover. A goofy peanut village filled with wacky characters and dumb side conversations. The first peek of new areas like the ruins and the Ducklands. You can play a fun little golf-like minigame. The game is also loaded with fresh and interesting mechanics. You can walk away from conversations at any time, giving you total player freedom, as well as a health system that lets you set the challenge wherever you feel it would be most comfortable for you. The full game is going to be totally non-linear, over 20 different bosses. The latest stretch goal even adds a procedurally generated challenge area, so there's infinite content in an already replayable game. I think Scrabdackle is so special, I think you guys are going to love it. Please check out the link at the top of the description and the pinned comment. Go do that now. You can come back to this. TANKMEN's not going anywhere. Scrabdackle is. Don't miss your chance. Back to TANKMEN. While the dick jokes of TANKMEN may stand out and are easy to parody, there is a distinct sense of timing and dry delivery throughout all of JohnnyUtah's work that is difficult to emulate.
Draconius, I've been using Facebook and Twitter for somewhat nefarious purposes.
The series was an immediate hit and still ranks among some of the all-time highest rated animations on the site. JohnnyUtah took a big swing with this little Newgrounds logo, and quickly and definitively established their mascot, the tone and brand of the site at large. I wondered if there was any pressure to live up to a certain standard with the series, or to represent the site in a particular way. I'm not sure I was even thinking about representing. I just thought I could make something funny. I grew up with Mad Max movies, and these simple character designs, which I imagined living in a post-apocalyptic world just appealed to me. Tom was 100% supportive and let me do whatever I want. I also wanted to know if Johnny had any negative feelings about the reductive way the humor of the series is now portrayed as being cock jokes only. I'm thrilled so many people enjoyed them and wanted to make their own. Most users got the dry humor and themes I was going for beyond the dick jokes. Deceptively simple, artistically creative, conceptually unique, pure creator freedom, and unabashedly R-rated. If you wanted to immediately understand everything that Newgrounds stands for, TANKMEN isn't a bad place to start.
Ha 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 ha! You're just jealous you don't have spikes and style, and we do. Ugh! Ha 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 ha! Look who's jealous of everybody that doesn't have a bullet in their liver!
Unfortunately, as of right now, that original TANKMEN animation, specifically the first one, is not currently available on Newgrounds. One section of the animation includes a scene directly from Titanic, a full clip, song, audio, everything just put straight on the screen, and with many previous troubles with copyright, Newgrounds cannot risk hosting this flagship first installment in its original form. They may be punk rock and allow mature content, but everything has to remain legal to not risk being shut down. That's been a legitimate risk several times in the past. While the shot-reverse shot style conversation is effective, especially with Jeff's deadpan style, with crass gags that would make the likes of Seth Rogen or Judd Apatow blush, he felt compelled to continually challenge himself. That initial movie had strong designs, top-tier lip-syncing, and an aesthetic that served as a really intriguing interpretation of Newgrounds as a name and concept, while maintaining that black, white, and orange palette. That's really impressive. And through the series, you can witness JohnnyUtah seeking excuses to practice and improve his art throughout. This personal challenge and desire to shake things up is a large part of why we haven't seen further installments. Speaking to the unreleased TANKMEN 2.5 and 3, they were both written and voiced, but I disliked animating so much I couldn't bring myself to finish them. Animating this series was messing with my head because it felt like it wasn't allowing me to progress as an artist with the simple style of everything. We can see from a few screenshots that he was going in a totally new direction with the latest installments. Still recognizably TANKMEN, but with plenty more opportunity to add to the character designs and to build on things from there. I have a quick aside about the series. Newgrounds held a contest on the audio portal, challenging users to create a theme song for the characters. The user Arbiter was crowned the winner, although hilariously, their theme has never actually been used in any entry of the series. It was tagged in TANKMEN 1.5 as a way of cementing it as official, despite never being heard in that movie. JohnnyUtah often speaks negatively of his own work, and I'd asked if that was a motivation tactic, or rather just a personal tendency he could not override. It is motivating. It can also be terribly frustrating, but I have some competitive spirit in me, so seeing other talented people strives me to always do better. And speaking further on motivation, it can come in many forms. It might be the need to do better one day, it just might be fear and anxiety pushing me on other days. But hey, whatever gets the job done. The characters and environments of the series are constantly changing, being shown from multiple angles and more difficult to animate shots, including lengthy action scenes. I'm sure many of us, including myself, would have been content with 30 episodes of these characters chatting in JohnnyUtah's unmistakably sarcastic voice. I really respect that he's been rather sparing and protective with the series. In the span of a few years, we only ever had the 4 entries. I enjoyed writing and voicing the lines and coming up with stuff on the spot. I didn't enjoy animating them really. I didn't like animating at all for a long time. It was all just a means to an end to get the story across. The later installments expanded the world and characters, turning this Newgrounds-inspired environment into this Mad Maxian-like wasteland, rather than simply feeling like a war zone. This really opened up the possibilities. Yet with the prequel, TANKMEN 0.5 being the most recent entry in the series, we're left wondering what more there could have been in this apocalyptic setting. Sure, the starting point was edgy, but the lore was quickly expanding and the characters becoming more well developed. To his credit, the series was evolving and growing. It reminds me of the way Trey Parker and Matt Stone started South Park, with the most over-the-top, offensive poop and pee jokes they could possibly think up, before reeling that in favor of more complex storylines, with a more character-driven focus. TANKMEN may joke about hard-ons or getting shot in the dick, but there are loads of well-written, often clever, hilariously delivered lines I still quote on occasion.
Are those new goggles? Oh man, you're looking mighty handsome today.
Thanks, Steve. I feel handsome today.
The whole series was just about awkward friendships and relationships in this fucked up world, but it's normal to them. I feel like the scene where they're debating running over a guy head or legs first sort of encapsulates what I liked about the series.
Permission to run over this asshole, sir. He would scream in agony, wouldn't he? Because, Steve, I don't think I can mentally handle that. Well, I guess it depends. If he went head or legs first, right? Hey!
The most common critique I've come across is that TANKMEN 2 felt forced. I think that spawns from users simply disliking the change in direction. From an old comment of Johnny's responding to some particularly vocal critics, "You guys don't seriously think I just want to tween guys around telling dick jokes for 20 episodes, do you? Give me a little more credit than that." If he would have done more of the same, he'd have been called a one-trick pony and people would have called the series stale. He did something new and people thought it was too big of a departure. This one 3-minute cartoon represented an entire site, and in tow behind that was an entire fan base who all wanted something specific. I'm not surprised he never made a sequel to it. Unless it was a 90-minute long feature film that acted as an expanded version of that original animation but also felt completely original, then it's hard to imagine it not being flooded with the loud rants of a vocal minority's rage and resentment. The series was immediately put on a pedestal, and I'm sure that's not very conducive to working under. More recently on Twitter, with the renewed conversation, JohnnyUtah has teased what he referred to as TANKMEN Zero, the joke being that it's both a prequel to everything else and the ground zero for this apocalyptic wasteland. I asked if this was something he had ever seriously worked on, or just a fun concept. So, because of this question, I dug up the script I haven't looked at in 11 years. The general idea was instead of soldiers, they were scientists. The color palette was also entirely reversed, guys in white suits with black visors on a blue background. Suffice to say, they accidentally destroy the world. I think that sounds like a great concept, and such a funny way to step a little bit outside of the norm. The idea of inverting all the colors in the world through some apocalyptic event? That's just brilliant. 4 official episodes, but a very enduring legacy. It didn't take long before the parodies started rolling out. The simplicity of that first installment meant that anyone could mimic the shots, designs, and pacing of the movie rather easily. I'm sure most found it a difficult balance to actually achieve the immature cock joke humor without it becoming obnoxious. And I'm also sure many didn't care and went full force with it regardless. As more of these started coming out, it became this absurd race to the bottom to see who could minimize the animation to a point of barely functioning and dial up the juvenile side of things to 11. Through this insanity, we have some of the stupidest yet most iconic Flash movies on all of Newgrounds. I would suspect almost none of them are funny in isolation, but combined with the well-loved TANKMEN series and understanding what creators were trying to achieve with these parodies, they are truly something special. A few of my favorites: Stamper's take on it really cemented the concept and phrase of cock joke.
Hey Steve, how you doing, Captain? Cock joke. Not bad. Cock joke.
Obviously that's not something that was originally said in TANKMEN, but in a way now it feels like it's all they said. Video Game Donkey made a crazy amount of stuff on Newgrounds back in the day, well before he was known for anything outside of that site, and he contributed this masterpiece.
Hey, look! I'm the Tankman.
The whole thing quickly devolved to a point where Johnny made a parody of the parodies of his series. That's meta before people called things meta. And Newgrounds creator Tom Fulp also took a stab at it, which is one of my personal favorites. It's also the one I have the most trouble editing around to actually show within this video.
Pull this out. There it is. There's my penis. That's great, Steve. That's almost as big as my penis, but not quite as big.
Hearing Tom's gleeful voice flatly delivering those non-jokes is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. That's not to say creators have only made these intentionally poor parodies. We have a few standouts that have done some cool and unique things with the characters, really putting their own unique stamp on it. Not quite on the same scale as something like Madness or Pico. Those characters are blank slates, primed for action, with near endless ways for their stories to play out. TANKMEN was so firmly established in such a particular setting, tone, and execution that I think creators have maybe hesitated to break that mold. In recent years, the tank is still a prominent part of the Newgrounds brand and merchandising, although it no longer holds a prominent place in the Newgrounds site or header. It was hard to make the tank smaller. The site header was pretty bulky, and large headers were increasingly frowned on, including from artists who didn't want to compete for screen space. The logo also didn't scale well to a mobile layout, which is something Newgrounds put a lot of focus into in recent years. We did make a chibi version of the tank, but even that was ultimately too big to work well. Outside of that mainline series, the Tankmen have been featured in a few prominent high-end Flash games that feature Newgrounds character mashups, such as Portal Panic and Newgrounds Rumble. Newgen undertook a cool project, using bits of Jeff's art and audio, with permission, to create the game Tankmen 2 The Chase, an interactive way of experiencing the big action scene of Tankmen 2. But at large, there isn't a lot of Tankmen games or other content. I inquired if Tom, JohnnyUtah, or any other Newgrounds staff ever attempted an official Tankmen game. I had tinkered a little with the Tankmen game concept, but the general style and color scheme felt kind of limiting to me, so I never got super excited about an idea. Johnny similarly indicated any ideas he had never got very far. It's interesting that the person who seemingly chose the color palette and the creator of the animated series both struggle with that limitation. It really doesn't give you a lot to play around with. Obviously it's doable, but it would be hard to work on something if you weren't personally excited by it. While Tankmen-inspired videos and games have been less fashionable in recent years, it is very likely we're about to see the greatest peak in Tankmen interest in over a decade, with the character making an appearance in the viral Newgrounds sensation Friday Night Funkin' with the upcoming Week 7. Which, by the way, the annual Pico Day is being hosted on Newgrounds May 1st. It's not too late to put together your own fan creation for that. It can be dedicated to Pico, Tankmen, or literally any other Newgrounds character, but I expect we'll see a lot of those this year. Phantom Arcade had asked JohnnyUtah to step in and update the original logo done by Evil Skater. So we have yet another prominent logo update sandwiching this whole saga. I wanted to respect Evil Skater's original and just clean up what I felt was necessary. And in terms of getting Tankmen into Friday Night Funkin', Phantom Arcade was also instrumental in Tankmen's inclusion. We had Pico in Week 3 and now Tankmen, two of the most iconic, most prolifically featured characters in all of Newgrounds history, both being among only a handful of official Newgrounds characters, despite hundreds that have their full history existing solely on the site. I wanted to ask Tom how he viewed the role of both Pico and Tankmen. I pitched it to him as whether or not he saw either of them as Newgrounds' Mario. I always sort of saw Tankmen as the mascot of Newgrounds, and Pico as someone who represents the user. So in Newgrounds terms, Tankmen is Mario, and Pico is like Nestor from Nintendo Power, who coincidentally also had orange hair. Pico wasn't consciously inspired by Nestor, but I like the correlation of them both sort of representing the user or player. And while we're here for you Friday Night Funkin' fans, I have a wee bit of an inside scoop. We had recently seen Pico entirely retconned, which Tom has now leaned into as official series canon, and I was curious how things were being handled for Tankmen lore, whether the character to be featured would be Captain or some generic tank man. The Funkin' world is pretty much Dave's creative vision. He's crafting the story, and I believe in this world, the Tankmen don't exist in the future, but on a far-off military base. I'm cool with it all, of course. I look forward to what he does with it. And with the first song of Week 7 having already been released, and dozens of modders already doing their own interpretation of it, we're all well aware of what's to come, but I had to laugh picturing someone recording 50 different uhs trying to get that sample just right. They were never meant to be in a song. I simply did them because it's a meme or catchphrase with me at this point, and Kawaii Sprite heard one he liked and ran with it. It's funny because I think the other three sound like shit and managed to just accidentally get one good one in there, and the rest is history. Johnny was even kind enough to share an exclusive listen of the original audio file that the eventually came from. I'll leave that to play unobscured.
Alright, I'll just say some catch lines. Alright. You ugly. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
And now I fully expect one of you out there to make some sort of UGG B-side out of this, or even just an remix that simply features an alternate take. Make it happen. As for continuing the Tankmen series, JohnnyUtah has teased maybe finding an animator to finish Tankmen 2.5 and 3 for him. I'm honestly still debating finishing them. I'm putting 100% into Nightmare Cops right now, and don't want to be stretched too thin. Towards the end of the interview, I had some kind of wrap-up questions, and he asked that everyone go and watch Contra Rampage on Newgrounds, a frame-by-frame animated bit of violent insanity that he felt was underappreciated in its time. It's never too late for one of these things to catch on. I'll have a link to that down in the description. And when given the opportunity to plug something, he asked that you follow Newgrounds and Nightmare Cops on Twitter. Those are his primary focus right now, just trying to keep hype levels high for that. So go rewatch some Tankmen, check out Contra Rampage, and while you're busy checking things out, patiently waiting week 7, go and visit that Scrabdackle Kickstarter. I hope third time's the charm for bringing that up. You won't regret it. Flashlight is a whole lengthy series that I have. I've done installations on many other popular series, characters, games, and so on. I'll have a playlist in the end cards. Check that out if you want more of this type of content. And hey, maybe check out the Patreon if you want the full interview, as well as to have your name over in the credits over here. Look at all these people. Pretty cool, eh? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.